if technology ever gets to the point where I can like convey smells from my location onto like the camera, I would do it so willingly, because I've got a pizza here and it's the nicest thing on the planet, just smelling fresh pizza from the oven. You can't beat it. You just can't beat it. Hello Internet, Oliver Worley from Ikarus's workshop here, and I wanted to think and talk about critiquing and expanding upon Dael Kingsmill's most recent video. Now, I'm a big fan of Dael Kingsmill's sort of narration and style and content. I'm a really big fan. It's actually arguably my favourite channel out there. It's kind of what inspired me to make my own, despite the kind of slow start I've had. But Kingsmill presents a mythological and trope bend to her work, and then incorporates themes as like a primary source for her inspiration and what she builds up from. When she talks about D&D, there's always a thematic element that needs to be discussed. It's less about the mechanics. Then the mechanics enforce a theme. The mechanics themselves are like more of a tool for the theme rather than the other way around. Oftentimes you'll see all these Dungeons and Dragons channels have like some sort of mechanical focus, but Kingsmill focuses quite heavily on the thematic, and that's really what I mesh well with. I'm a big fan of having like a thematic primary focus, and so that's why I really like the channel. And for that very reason, I decided to kind of comment on our most recent video. It was about how the level progression in D&D from like 1 to 20 has a major flaw in that many classes often have levels where it's just hit point gains or stat boosts, and in reality it doesn't feel like you're leveling up, it doesn't feel like you're getting more powerful, because you don't have the sort of increased abilities or utility that others, you could other levels as that class would otherwise give you. A fighter getting to level 5 gets the extra attack, but the 8th level fighter, there's no real special ability at 8th level for a fighter. It's just extra hit points mostly. I think fighters are possibly the worst choice, because they get like ability score improvements basically every other level. So throw a stone at me or whatever. Fighter's not a great example, but I'm not retaking this again, so you're just going to have to put up with fighters. But let's say basically any other class, like a bard, their 4th level, they don't really get any fancy abilities, or their 8th level, or their 6th level. I think 6th level for bards they actually do get something, but let's 7th. Either way, there are levels here that don't really provide much sort of benefit to the character, and Dael proposes that we should just remove them. Oftentimes, she did mention this in her video, and I suggest go and watch this video, because I'm just going to do like a broad summary and then expand on things. She goes into detail and has like a nuanced way of presenting these points, which I think is worth listening to and worth investigating. Though I will admit, if you're on my video, you've probably come about it through typing Kingsmill or something. Okay? That's kind of what I'm going for. And now I've lost where I was. So Dael then goes on to say that maybe in fact each class could have like a number of abilities that you could like buy with certain points that you get from achieving a number of experience, so much so that whenever you level up you always have an option to increase, and so it's your choice. A monk buys their Flurry of Blows ability at level 2 or level 8, depending on which, when they want to have that ability. You could, there is a, they didn't go into this in their video, but there's the assumption that you could place like a level restriction, saying you can't get Flurry of Blows till your 5th level, or whatever. The point is, there is the option for that to occur. It's a more kind of player-determined sort of character building system, and it removes all the kind of empty levels. And being the antagonist and the devil's advocate that I am, I've decided to come up with like 2 expansions on this point. Either a counter expansion, which is like dedicated on assuming why I believe that these 20th levels and those levels that don't really have any substantial meaning are important and worthwhile, and then taking Dael's point further and saying, in actual fact, why bother even with classes? So, I've got these 2 points, and I haven't really decided how I'm going to tackle it. So let's say evens are my counter-argument, and odds are my 4 argument, because, you know, we're doing a D&D video. If you don't use dice, something's wrong with you. 5, what did I say? Odds were the counter argument? Yeah, oh god, I can't remember. I'm not even going to review. I'm just going to say it's the 4 argument. So let's just support Dael's point to begin with. Let's support it, okay? So to expand on Dael's point of the idea of you know, not having classes, the real benefit of kind of Dael's argument, okay, is the idea is it removes all the unnecessary progression and makes everything feel like it has some sort of value within the progression system. Every time you level up, every time you achieve a certain amount of experience, you know you're going to be getting something that makes a difference to your character, not just empty stat boosts, unless of course that's what you choose. And so when we say, in fact, let's remove classes altogether, what we're doing is just enhancing that the benefit that Dael already proposes in her idea of a point-buy system. The limitations of the... So obviously D&D has the the standard tropes of certain classes, okay? And if you're getting rid of like the standardized progression, and so of course there are a number of benefits to what I propose. Dael's point obviously suffers from the limitation of maintaining the class system, and while there are obviously benefits to that in terms of like having a basis for inspiration for players and ideas, it inherently still limits certain options that people can have. One of the limiting factors in D&D standardly is the complexity it takes to multi-class, and how frustrating it is for especially new players to create that kind of ranger wizard they always wanted, just because of the inherent lack of synergy between certain skills and abilities between the two. Wisdom and intelligence just doesn't quite fit for the sort of concept they're going for, and if they take cleric they won't have the spells they want. And so by removing the classes entirely and instead just having a bunch of abilities, okay, that folks can buy, with their ability points, it allows for this sort of creativity that would otherwise be much more difficult. You don't have to be a smart arcane ranger, and you don't even have to be a charismatic one. You can just have the kind of arcane style spells and fit that with your ability to perceive your environment and your kind of intuition. Yeah. You can make casting intuitive, casting arcanely intuitive. What it does, it allows for a kind of a more broad thematic perspective that players can choose from. You can choose to be that wizard or that ranger, and you can put them together. Now, of course, the limitation is that there will be like the typical D&D tropes will kind of get disintegrated somewhat, or kind of flattened, rather than being like the pedestals in which the game is played on. The original like fighter, cleric, wizard, and thief would no longer hold the same sort of presence. And so to get around that problem, you could always present like a synergy system where certain abilities work better with others. Sneak attack works better with stealth, and wizard abilities works better with like empowerment spells and other feats, and those sort of abilities. And what this means is, it's more efficient to make characters with abilities that would work well together. And in turn, while you could theoretically make an arcane wizard, you'd have to actively want to do that. There would be no just, let's slam some abilities together and hope it works. You've got to have a concept and idea in your mind. Obviously, that might not be preferable. You might think, actually, I want my players to be, kind of have that sort of freedom to choose, and so the synergy bonus might not work. But the idea is there. The idea of removing that sort of limitation of the tropes, the internal inbuilt limitation, is a useful one to consider and worth having in your bank account, as it were. There's of course the balancing problem that everyone has when they introduce a new rule like this, but I don't think it'd be that much of a problem if you were to try this. The biggest problem I find is trying to break down those kind of boundaries, because most people require at least some sort of solid foundation to kind of expand ideas from, and by removing these limitations, you're also removing the foundation in which players would build. Hence, why they might struggle to fulfill certain themes and ideas. And so there is a limitation on it would make being creative more difficult because there's no sort of a predetermined options, as it were. Oftentimes people have, like, when you're presented with like certain archetypes and tropes, people take those tropes and then change it to fit themselves. But if you don't even give them a trope to follow, there's a good chance either it'll take the people won't enjoy making a character. Making something from scratch is difficult. I, as a writer myself, have had quite a lot of trouble. And the best way I've gone about doing it is having a D&D class system to build my characters from, and then attribute a personality and ideas to that. And so it's just something to be cautious of. If you were to implement it, your players might actually struggle with the freedom, because too much freedom in like I don't think too much freedom is inherently a bad thing. I think that's a bad philosophy. But not having structure can often lead to confusion and idealism. So it's just idolization, being idle, okay, not like holding something as like an idol. Whatever, you know what I mean. That's my premise. That's my point. That's what I'm getting down on paper or in this format. So just forgive me and leave me be, okay? Just because I don't know the correct word for the sentence. I also, because I did roll a dice, I wanted to talk about like a criticism to Dael Kingsmill's very point, to the idea of limiting these levels. And a lot of these points have actually already been discussed, but I'll go through them again if it needs to. But there's a fundamental one which I feel like Dael Kingsmill kind of touched on, but made it out like it's a benefit, and I want to argue that it's not. So the biggest advantage of having 20 levels is a pacing element, and the sense of individuality to the classes. Two fundamentals that I think are very important to any sort of D&D game. But let's tackle pacing first. So because of the way that you have because of the power progression, power progression is a very difficult thing to kind of get people's heads around. And I think that having a bunch of empty levels in between your kind of major steps and jumps of characters is an important way of making it feel like you're increasing in power without kind of sprinting too far. Oftentimes you'll find that in a lot of novels or videos or anything, people will start off very limited and increase in power very quickly without the sort of slow kind of grounded nature to what it should actually feel like to increase in power. I feel like getting more powerful should be some sort of internal reward, not something given out willy-nilly. And so yet I also want people to progress and feel like they're progressing at every significant stage. When I make my D&D games, I have a bunch of arcs, and in the early game they'll level up about once per arc. In the late game they'll level up like 2 or 3 times per arc. But the idea is that every significant aspect within that game will increase their level. I play by a milestone system because XP is horrible to track, and I don't like it. And I find, but with this system, I find that having these 20 levels means that by the time I get to that latter point, once I've explored everything that I want to explore in the game, the players are, relatively towards the end. But they've had these levels, they've had these principles in their existence where they've leveled up and gotten more powerful, but it doesn't feel like it's forced. It feels like they've naturally earned the power that they've had. Getting to level 5 to get that fireball spell is a long progression, and it shouldn't be like you just jump from first levels to second and then from second to third. It feels too quick. It feels like you're learning powerful magics too quickly, and that's something that I don't want to kind of put a thematic in my game. Magic is like a weird and mystical arcane art that requires dedication of years to really master, and though adventurers can clearly accelerate that progress through their internal experiences, I don't think it should be made easy. I feel like a fireball should be a worthy reward, and as such it needs a lengthy time to get there. Just like a fighter being able to attack twice is a master of martial discipline to be able to attack faster and more effectively than everyone else. And as such, I don't think it's valuable to just kind of race through to get that thing. Now, of course, this is kind of not the most solid of arguments, because I think Dael puts the idea that you would have some sort of limitations, and you wouldn't give them the XP to level up and get that second attack too quickly. You'd have to balance it yourself. But I feel like the inherent mechanics of 5th edition already enforces the idea of internal progression and the idea of you being able to improve individually or improve as a character. It allows an individuality of progression, and it has the right time and pacing for a campaign to feel grounded without being too long, but also fast like you're adventurous. It's got a good nature, and it's a good principle to abide by. If you were to remove the class system, I would probably follow the same time frames anyway, and so it probably wouldn't make a massive amount of difference in terms of my character progression, other than the players will just feel a jolt from one attack per round to second attack per round. There will be no, I've got more hit points, so I must be more powerful, or I've now got a new fighting style, so I must be more powerful. There would be less of that and more. I feel like it would feel more jolted. That's kind of my premise. But another consideration to take with this kind of progression idea is the fact that when one class gets a new ability, another class isn't. Okay, so at 6th level, a fighter doesn't really get anything, and yet a bard does. Now, many of you might believe that this is inherently actually a flaw with the system, but I disagree. I think it's important for it, because it does two things. Firstly, it makes each class feel individual, and secondly, it gives a progression curve to each class. A wizard, for example, accelerates quickly, but then slows down towards the late game. They get very powerful early because of their constant earning of new spells and spell slots, but then towards the later game, they're not getting any of those. They're not getting a 5th first level spell slot, at 17th level, and so they're fast and then they slow down, or they're fast and then they slow down. If that was a graph, it would go like that, But a fighter on the other hand, starts off relatively slow. It's a cruel for them to get to that peak of 4 attacks per round, and they would go like that. They would accelerate towards the later game. What it does is it kind of adds a thematic to the class that having the other thing would not, simply by inherent mechanics. A wizard feels like they're really excited and they're learning lots of these basic incantations and spells quite quickly in their early stages of study, but as soon as they get to the more advanced magics, it's very much like taking A-level maths, in the sense that you've got to bring lots of different points all over, and you don't improve your base skills, but to improve your kind of higher tier skills, it takes a lot of effort from all over the place, and so you slow down. You might have been really fast at improving at maths in year 6, but now when year 12, you're going to take your time about achieving, understanding what that graph means, because you've got to extrapolate and bring tons of bits of information. It creates the thematic of the arcane wizard, but in conjunction to that, the fighter who takes ages to kind of understand the principles of kind of martial prowess, they then get into the flow and the understanding, and so they get better and better, and they can explore and expand until a point where they're true masters, from the slow start that they originally had. So I feel like this sort of individuality that is presented in the kind of progression of each class is more valuable than a lot of other people state. It makes both the classes feel individual. Essentially, it gives each class a limelight when in the level up scenario. If everyone all gained an ability at the same time, while it might be easier to track and everyone will feel okay about it, there'll be no moment of, yes, I have got more powerful. It will always present, yes, we've got more powerful, and there's no sort of individual achievement there. You don't feel particularly you don't feel particularly special individually, and I think it's important to have those special moments, and as such I think there needs to be some sort of staggered effect, which is what D&D 5th edition does. I would say I'm unlikely to change my rules. I'm going to stick with the kind of standard level progression, firstly because it's worked, and secondly because I've built many a campaign around it and played a couple, and its progression system works for me. It works. It's neat. It's tidy. I like it. There's no hiccup to it. There's no flaw. I feel like it's something that can be adhered to without anything going wrong. And while Dael Kingsmill's points have merit and ideas are worth exploring, I don't think it's a be-all and end-all to the kind of changing factors. Again, as I sign this off, telling you to hit all those buttons below because I like watching big numbers grow. Dael Kingsmill is basically my favourite YouTuber and makes my favourite content. This is not an attack in any way. It's more of just like a collection of my thoughts on that topic in a unsophisticated, kind of clunky, bad lighting format from a teenager who's still got spots on their face. So yeah, just take everything I say with a grain of salt, but it's just something to think about. And I'm going to awkwardly sign off. So enjoy yourselves and hail the algorithm. Yeah.